It was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. The sun filtered gently through the magnolia trees, the string quartet played Vivaldi with just the right mix of elegance and charm, and the air smelled like fresh roses and champagne. I stood near the altar, my dress hugging just right, not too tight, not too loose. Everything was picture perfect. At least, on the surface. I watched guests arrive, old coworkers, a few local politicians, and the extended branches of my tangled family tree. The garden buzzed with soft conversation, clinking glasses, and laughter that only sounded honest if you weren't listening too hard. I kept glancing toward the front gate. He said he'd come. My brother. After years of silence, after that last argument that tore everything apart, he promised. Maybe today would be the day we started over. Maybe this wedding would stitch together what life had torn apart. Then I saw him. He stepped onto the stone pathway like he owned the place, tailored navy suit, perfect posture, the kind of calm that made you nervous. My heart jumped. Not from joy, not exactly. It was more like someone threw cold water on my spine. The murmurs started before he even reached the crowd. Some cousins nodded, surprised. Others stiffened, looked away. I caught Aunt Clara raising her eyebrows as if to say, well, this ought to be interesting. I held my breath. Last time we spoke, he told me I was throwing my life away, that no one would ever take me seriously. That I was nothing but an emotional charity case. I never forgot that. Still, I told myself I'd be gracious. Mature. I'd rise above it. Guests milled around the open bar. Laughter softened the edges. I smiled, nodded, accepted compliments on the decor. But every time I saw him across the lawn, my stomach turned. He chatted with people like nothing ever happened. And when he made his way toward me, offering a polite nod and that same smug grin, I returned it with all the grace I could fake. He leaned in slightly, his voice low but sharp. So still pretending all's well, huh? I didn't answer. I just held my ground, smiled tighter, and turned to greet another guest. My silence was my armor. It was almost time. The music shifted. Guests took their seats, the hush falling like fog. I walked toward the altar, hands steady, eyes forward. This was it. My new life. And then, he stood up. Right there, in the front row. No microphone, no warning. Just loud enough for the whole garden to hear. I'd like to make a quick toast, he said, lifting a glass like we were all at a bar and not 5 seconds from a wedding. There was polite laughter, a few confused glances. Then he said it. Here's to my baby sister. Always dreamed of being a mom. Shame biology had other plans. Laughter died. No, it didn't die, it was murdered. Silence wrapped around us, thick and choking. 90 people stared. A few mouths hung open. Someone dropped their glass. I couldn't breathe. My hands clenched the bouquet like a lifeline. I stared at him, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. Just sipped his drink like he'd said something charming. And in that moment, I felt completely exposed. Not just embarrassed. Violated. He knew. He knew how much I'd kept that private. I hadn't even told half the family. My fertility struggles weren't some punchline, they were my deepest shame, buried under years of appointments, tears, and silence. I wanted to disappear. Then, as if the universe needed a reset, a low purr of an engine turned every head. A sleek black car pulled up along the gravel. Door opened. And there he was. My fiancé stepped out, calm, composed, and carrying the kind of quiet power that made people shut up just by standing still. He walked straight to my brother. Didn't yell. Didn't push. Just looked at him with a stillness that felt louder than any outburst. "I knew," he said clearly. "From the beginning. And I never loved her any less." My brother tried to smirk. Failed. Then my husband turned to the guests. "She is the strongest woman I know. And anyone who can't see that doesn't deserve to be here." People clapped. Hesitantly at first. Then more joined. The sound was awkward, uneven. But it was enough. I should have felt safe. Seen. But inside, I was still burning. He meant well. He defended me. But it was my pain. My moment. My story to tell, or not tell. The ceremony continued, though nothing felt the same. I moved through it like a ghost in a dress, trying to keep up with a life that suddenly didn't feel like mine. Later, as the lights flickered on and guests drank away the discomfort, I stood near the edge of the dance floor, watching my brother charm someone at the bar like nothing happened. And I thought, they've never heard me. Not really. Not once. Even today, I was either a punchline or a symbol. Never just me. I looked at my husband, my anchor in the storm, and still, that storm raged inside me. Maybe it was time I stopped being the quiet one. People were still whispering. Not loudly, but enough to know they hadn't forgotten what just happened. The music resumed, someone popped open a bottle of champagne, and the officiant tried to guide us back into the ceremony with a tight smile like none of it had occurred. I stood beside my husband, hand locked in his, trying to mirror calm. Inside, I was anything but. I forced a smile, nodded at guests who tried to act normal, and spoke the vows we had written together like I wasn't shaking under the surface. The words came out steady. Too steady. Rehearsed. I couldn't stop wondering if they were watching me out of pity or shock, or both. The sun was still shining, but all I felt was heat in my face, like I was standing naked in a crowd. I caught a glimpse of my brother, sipping something brown, grinning like he had just won. I don't remember the kiss. Or the applause. Just that I looked out at familiar faces, and not one of them looked surprised. The reception was held just a few steps away, under hanging lanterns and strings of soft white lights. The same estate, just a different illusion. I walked in arm with my husband, smiling like nothing had happened. But I could feel it, the shift. I saw the way Aunt Joanne looked away when I caught her eye. The way two old friends paused their conversation the moment I walked by. Their glasses half raised, half hiding what they were really saying. And then there was Calder. At the bar, of course. Laughing with a cousin like it was a reunion, not a wreck. No apology, no shame, just another round. My mother passed me once near the hors d'oeuvres. She didn't say a word. Just touched my arm gently and smiled, like she was smoothing over a wrinkle in my veil. That made it worse. How could they all just move on? The food came out. Plates were filled. Toasts began. But every cheer, every clink of a glass, felt like static to me. Then came a tap on my shoulder. Lorraine, my mother-in-law, smiling that polished smile only women of her generation could perfect. Tanya stood next to her, straight-backed and unreadable. "Sweetheart," Lorraine said softly, "do you mind stepping aside for a moment?" They led me into one of the side rooms inside the estate, a quiet nook with old books and an untouched cheese platter. Tanya closed the door behind us. Lorraine's tone was gentle. I know today didn't unfold exactly as planned. But I think it's important that we stay focused on the joy. I looked at her, waiting. Tanya stepped in. What Calder said, it was hurtful. Inappropriate. But don't let it define your day. If you make a scene, it becomes real. So just pretend it didn't happen? I asked. Lorraine reached out, brushed a non-existent thread from my shoulder. Sometimes dignity looks like silence. I bit my tongue. My palms itched. You're strong, she added. Don't let this distract from what really matters, your marriage, your future. I smiled. Because that's what women do when they're being politely dismissed. I nodded, thanked them, and walked back out like I hadn't just been told to bury my pain for the sake of appearances. My husband met me at the entrance to the lawn. He looked into my eyes like he was searching for something, but I didn't give him anything to find. I wasn't angry at him. Not yet. But I felt it, boiling, rising, curling up my spine like smoke under the skin. I raised my glass during the next toast. Everyone turned. I'd like to say a few words, I said calmly. The crowd stilled. To the people in this room who have mistaken silence for weakness, I began, let me remind you, it takes a stronger person to carry pain than to throw it. I didn't look at Calder. I didn't have to. The message was delivered. Some clapped. Some avoided my eyes. But the air shifted. Just slightly. As I sat down, a memory struck me at 13, Calder stealing my diary and reading it aloud to friends in our backyard. I ran crying to my mother, and all she said was, let it go. He's just teasing. No more letting go. By the time the cake was cut and the dance floor opened, I had already made up my mind. I didn't want revenge. I wanted reckoning. Later, alone in the bridal suite, I took off my earrings slowly. My hands trembled, not from sadness, but from restraint. I looked in the mirror. Practiced the words I wished I'd said when Calder stood up. Every version burned on my tongue. They wanted me to be the bigger person. Fine. I would be. But not the quieter one. I picked up my phone. Opened the Notes app. Title, Everything Calder's Ever Done. And I began to write. Not in anger. Not in haste. But with the kind of clarity that only comes after enough people ask you to swallow your truth. I whispered to my reflection, this isn't over. Not by a long shot. I walked into our house the night after the wedding, and it felt strangely hollow. The doors closed softly behind me. The quiet was heavy. My husband offered me space, gentle reassurance, but I needed solitude. I slipped from my dress, folded it carefully, and placed it into a box labeled wedding keepsakes. As I did, my fingers brushed something tucked behind dresses on the rod. The closet was otherwise organized, efficient. How had I not seen it before? My phone glowed with silence, no texts, no calls, no I'm sorry. Just empty bubbles where messages should have been. I wondered, is this really what starting over looks like? Or am I simply abandoned in plain sight? I pried open that closet box. Inside was a smaller vintage keepsake chest, the kind with faded veneer and a tarnished clasp. My heart thudding, I unlatched it and revealed a stack of old envelopes, brittle and yellowed. My grandmother's handwriting curved across each one, addressed to my mother, my uncle, even to me, but many left blank inside. My breath caught. The first letter, to my mother, spoke of regret, how I failed you, how she bore a lifelong secret about her own betrayals. The next, to my uncle, confessed his pain of feeling unseen, pushed aside in family decisions. The last, and most jarring, was to me. It described the weight of silence, the burden women in our line carried quietly. She asked why she stopped defending her daughters, why she swallowed her own grief to protect the image of the family. My throat ached. Generations before me had been asked to carry sorrow without voice. This wasn't new. It was inherited. I remember childhood dinners, the unspoken tension, the sharp words withheld, the tears we swallowed under plates. Grandma used to fold her hands, bite her lip, never turn toward conflict. She remained the soft presence in the room, smoothing edges no one acknowledged were frayed. The letters drew a pattern, a lineage of women silenced, forced to smile while their hearts rose up in riot. I stood in front of my mirror, letter pressed to my chest. In that face I saw hers, gentle, wounded, resolved. I placed the final letter into a journal and titled the page "End Here." But I couldn't stop there. I opened my laptop and began typing a new letter. Not to them, but to myself. I poured in the wedding, the humiliation, the brace I wore day after day. I wrote, "I'm not writing this for them to understand. I'm writing it so I don't lose myself again." Each sentence felt like a stitch. This is the last time I'll swallow something that's choking me. By the time I saved the draft, the weight on my chest had lightened, not gone, but easier to carry. I printed the letter, slid it into a drawer marked "Truths They'll Never Ask For," and walked into the living room. There he was, my husband. Tea in hand. He didn't ask. Just offered it. So I sat beside him, clasped the warm cup, feeling its heat spread through me. Some battles scream. Others whisper behind locked doors. I thought, I need to be ready. They'll try to shrink me again, but now I've seen the root. That changes everything. When I stepped back into the reception hall, the music had resumed, as if nothing had splintered through the heart of this evening. Soft jazz draped the room, lights twinkling above polished tables, and guests pretending normalcy with small laughs and delicate sips of champagne. Their eyes told a different truth. Glances trailed after me, some laced with pity, others with discomfort, a few with irritation, as though my pain had become an inconvenience. My husband's hand brushed mine briefly, a silent tether, before he moved to greet a relative. I held my spine straight. I refused to be the wounded bride they expected to shatter. My mother stood near the dessert table, carefully adjusting floral arrangements that didn't need adjusting. She never looked my way. Calder lingered nearby, swirling his drink, smiling like a man who'd merely made an offhand joke. For a split second, his eyes met mine, smug, daring me to react. I didn't. I walked past him, not even granting him a pause. The room hadn't changed, but I had. The air thrummed with an unspoken message: we will not speak of it. But silence does not erase blood. It stains deeper. Dinner had begun, and the sound of cutlery on china tried to restore elegance. My father was summoned to the stage, microphone in hand, every inch the respected patriarch. I watched him closely. He thanked the guests, praised the Callahan strength, reminisced about raising his boys, and toasted to family legacy. He spoke of unity, resilience, tradition. But he never once said my name. Not a single syllable acknowledging the daughter standing in a bridal gown at her own wedding. I felt each omission like a thread being snipped. Applause followed, polite and hollow. I didn't clap. I couldn't. As guests settled again, I returned to my table, only to find it altered. My upholstered chair, matching every other seat at the head table, was gone. In its place sat a plain, plastic folding chair, cheap, cold, and out of place. It wasn't a mistake. No one else's seat had changed. Conversations stuttered around me. A woman across the table lowered her eyes. Someone whispered, "Surely that's an error." It wasn't. I lowered myself into that chair, feeling the chill of it seep through the fabric of my dress, as if to remind me where I truly sat in their hierarchy. The message was clear: know your place. I didn't leave. I waited. I lifted my glass, sipped water, steadying myself. I remembered other chairs, holidays where my seat was by the kitchen door, family gatherings where Calder's opinions filled the table while mine dissolved into wallpaper. My husband caught my gaze from across the room. His expression was unreadable, but his nod was deliberate. Don't break. Not here. Not for them. I breathed in slow, tasting metal behind my teeth. They thought humiliation would quiet me. They forgot pressure can forge steel. I stood and walked toward the garden doors, slipping out into the evening air. The sky was bruised with dusk, cicadas humming in the distance. I leaned against the stone railing, letting the cool air tame the flush in my cheeks. My father's speech echoed in my skull: family legacy, unity, sons. Not a word of me. Not a word of today. And that chair, that silent, deliberate cut. They wanted me erased, gently, gracefully, so no one could call it cruelty. I whispered, "You won't bury me under courtesy." I thought of something I once read: your silence will not protect you. My grandmother lived and died by softness. My mother perfected invisibility. I felt both their shadows behind me, urging me to fold. Instead, I straightened. I let the ache settle, not as a wound, but as fuel. They didn't invite me into legacy. I would carve my own. No more waiting for permission to exist. When I returned to the hall, nothing had changed, and yet everything had. Conversations paused as I crossed the floor. I didn't return to that plastic chair. I walked straight to the microphone near the bandstand. The bandleader stepped aside, startled. I didn't look at Calder. I didn't look at my parents. I looked at the guests, strangers, friends, witnesses. I felt the room brace. I spoke calmly. Tonight, I was congratulated without being acknowledged. I was given a seat without being given a place. A ripple moved through the room. Someone shifted uncomfortably. I continued, "Some believe silence keeps peace. But silence can also be a blade." I paused, the weight of 90 breaths hanging in the air. I wasn't trembling anymore. I am not here to disappear. I lowered the microphone. The room was frozen, poised between outrage and realization. I stepped back, not defeated, but declared. When I stepped away from that mic, the air didn't move. Not right away. There was this stretch of silence, maybe 2 seconds long, that felt like it had teeth. Then the sound came. A few scattered claps. Not polite, not enthusiastic. Just confused. Some guests looked at the floor. Others stole glances at each other. And a handful, just a few, nodded slightly, the kind of nods people give when they know what you said was true, even if they'll never say it out loud. My husband met me halfway to the edge of the dance floor. He didn't speak, didn't ask anything. He just reached for my hand and gave it a firm, steady squeeze. From across the room, I saw Calder watching. That slow, familiar smirk played across his face, wineglass in hand, like this was a game and I just moved my piece too early. Dad stood with a group of relatives, laughing about something as if nothing out of the ordinary had happened at all. In that moment, I knew some people weren't stunned. They were calculating. For them, my truth wasn't a wound. It was a weapon they didn't want me holding. I thought that would be the end of the drama for the night. That I'd said what needed saying and the rest would settle like dust. But life doesn't clean up that neatly. As the night thinned out and speeches wound down, a woman I didn't recognize at first approached me quietly. She had auburn curls pulled back tight and wore an emerald dress that looked just slightly out of step with the rest of the crowd, less showy, more serious. She extended a hand. "Ava," she said. "Michael's cousin." I nodded, still catching my breath from everything, trying to stay grounded. She leaned in. "I know this isn't the time, but I had to tell you before I left." Something about her voice cut through the noise around us. "They're planning something," she said. That stopped me. "Not tonight," she went on. "But after. They're going to isolate you." Subtle stuff. It's how the Callahans do it when a woman gets too public. I blinked. "You mean push me out of the family?" "No. Not all at once. It'll be small. You'll be left off emails. Group chats. Holidays won't include you by accident. They'll start whispering that you're unstable. That you need rest. Maybe even suggest a little distance would be best for your marriage." I swallowed hard. It wasn't paranoia. It was protocol. "They did it to my aunt," Ava added. "She stood up to them once, about money, not abuse, but the pattern's the same. First, they undermine your credibility. Then they reshape the story." My hands had gone cold. She touched my arm gently. "If you don't control the narrative, they will." And just like that, she disappeared into the crowd. My next steps felt automatic, like my body moved before my brain caught up. I found Calder out on the back patio, leaning against the stone wall, eyes on the garden lights flickering in the distance. I stood next to him without a word. It took him a minute before he even noticed me. "You know," he said, never looking my way, "if you keep trying to make everything about you, eventually people stop caring." I didn't bite. I just looked out at the garden too. "They're already preparing the next act," I said. "You can play dumb. Won't change a thing." He scoffed. "You always were the dramatic one. I'm not warning you because I want your apology. I'm done with that." He turned now, lips twitching with amusement. I continued, calm and even, "I'm warning you because if this keeps going, I won't stay quiet again. And next time, I'll say your name. I'll say every name." His face didn't move much, but I saw it, the flicker. The pause. "Good. I'm not here to destroy your reputation, Calder. I just won't let it destroy me." He didn't answer. I didn't wait. Back in our suite, I slipped off the heels that had pinched my toes for hours. My body ached, not from dancing but from holding so much inside. I sat on the edge of the bed, elbows on knees, staring at nothing. No tears came. Just a low, steady pulse in my chest. Something hardening. I pulled out my phone. Jotted names. Phrases. Details. Anything Ava had said, anything I'd overheard since the engagement, even before. This wasn't about vengeance. It was about record keeping. Memory can be slippery when people gaslight you. Then I opened my laptop. Wrote a document, account of events, wedding day. Time-stamped it. Synced it to the cloud. Sent a copy to my work email. Just in case. Next, I reached for the vow booklet, the one I'd read from at the ceremony, before all this. I folded it shut and tucked it beside my grandmother's letters. Two kinds of love stories, side by side. One spoken. one hidden, both still unfinished. The music downstairs was slowing down now. One more dance, maybe two, before the lights came up and reality set in. I found Michael near the bar, alone now, waiting. He smiled gently, hand outstretched. I stepped into him, let him lead us to the dance floor. It was a soft, slow song. Nothing grand. While we moved together, I noticed them, family members watching me a little more closely. Like I'd become something new overnight. Something to monitor. I leaned in, close to his ear. They're already rewriting the story. He didn't hesitate. Then we write ours, he said, kissing my forehead. For the first time that day, I let myself rest against him. I knew the fight wasn't over. But now, I wasn't fighting alone. And I wasn't unarmed. This wasn't going to be the kind of marriage they expected. It was going to be something else entirely. The courthouse smelled like polished wood and old arguments. Celine and I walked in just after 9. She didn't say much, she never did right before things got serious. I could feel the weight in her stride, though. The kind of silence that holds knives in its pockets. Security was slow. Everyone was moving like it was just another day, like this wasn't a room where families get torn apart with signatures and smirks. I caught sight of Calder's attorney down the hall. Tall. Slick. Already laughing at something. His glance at me didn't last long, but it didn't have to. It said what I already knew, they weren't here for fairness. They came to win. I stood straighter. My chest ached from everything that hadn't been said since that wedding day. But my mouth stayed shut, my spine didn't bend. We walked into the waiting room. Celine whispered, "They're going to come at you hard, maybe from angles that don't even feel legal. But you stay steady." I nodded. Then the doors opened. Courtrooms are cold. Not just in temperature, but in spirit. A place where truth is cross-examined until it doesn't sound like itself anymore. Opening statements were polite, practiced. And then came the envelope. Calder's attorney stood, walked it to the clerk. A plain manila envelope. But when the judge opened it, it changed the air in the room. He read aloud what they claimed was a medical report. A diagnosis. Allegedly mine. It said I was infertile. A dated clinic visit, test results, commentary. I felt my face drain. The room didn't gasp, but it didn't need to. The silence did enough damage. I looked across at Calder. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Celine stood so fast her chair knocked back. "Your Honor," she said. "This document was never disclosed in pretrial. We demand immediate verification of its origin and chain of custody." Calder's lawyer shrugged like he was tossing a pebble in a pond. "It raises questions of transparency. The plaintiff may have had motive to conceal." My hands clenched under the table. They weren't just trying to discredit me, they were trying to turn my body into a lie. My ability to be a mother into ammunition. The judge made a note. No reaction. No sympathy. It wasn't over. Next recess came. We didn't even have time to breathe before they introduced a sealed affidavit. From Ilara. Her words, sworn. That years ago, my own mother warned her that I had issues and that silence would spare the family embarrassment. It hit harder than anything Calder could have done. Ilara. The one who held my hair back when I got sick in high school. The one who braided my hair at Grandma's wake. She sat there like a guest at someone else's funeral. When we stepped into the hallway, I cornered her. Alara, did you ever stand for me? My voice was low, but it cracked anyway. She didn't meet my eyes at first. Then she said, I was told to stay out of it. I didn't know it would come to this. I almost believed her. Almost. Back inside, the fight turned technical. Objections. Paper trails. Legal terms dressed up like truth. But in that chaos, something cleared for me. The mess, the accusations, even the betrayal, it all landed differently now. This wasn't a surprise attack. It was tradition. After recess, I pulled Celine aside. We fight it all, I told her. But not just the documents. We bring a narrative, my truth, written clearly. With names, history, patterns. She hesitated. That could trigger countersuits. I didn't blink. Let them. I'm not asking to win. I'm asking to not disappear. We made our way back into the courtroom. Celine's notes were tighter, her posture more direct. We'd stopped playing defense. The judge called the session back to order. He demanded both parties submit original documents. Medical records. Full chain of custody. Nothing less. Calder's lawyer nodded. He already knew how to dance this dance. But I watched his mouth twitch, just a bit. A signal. The ground wasn't as firm as he'd hoped. The judge scheduled the next hearing. Set a deadline. We stood. I didn't feel relief. I felt pressure. Like someone had handed me a glass egg and dared me not to drop it. We left the room. The hallway lights felt harsh. Everything echoing too loud. But I didn't feel small. I whispered to myself, this day won't define me. Tomorrow, I redefine it. End of chapter. The courthouse steps felt like a stage I hadn't auditioned for, but somehow ended up on anyway. Celine walked ahead, her pace brisk, scanning for the car. I followed, blinded for a moment by camera flashes, paparazzi, local news, maybe even someone's bored teenager with a smartphone. Their lenses didn't see me. They saw what the headlines had already written. Inside the car, the silence pressed in hard. I pulled out my phone. My fingers moved on their own, tapping into the live stream that was already trending. I watched my own face appear, too composed, too still, as legal pundits debated my body like I was a lab report. Someone else's voice filled the screen, talking about recent documents presented and questions around psychological stability. That word again, stability. Like I was a shelf someone forgot to screw in tight enough. Then I saw him. Behind one of the reporters, just for a second, my father. Standing at the courthouse door. Hands in his pockets, shoulders relaxed. Watching. He knew exactly where the cameras would be. And he stood there anyway. Every clip, every caption, they didn't need truth. They just needed a frame. And I was already inside it. When I stepped back onto the reception floor, everything felt louder, though no one was saying a word to me. Forks scraped plates. A cough here, a cleared throat there. People kept eating, but with that half-glance kind of interest, like they were watching something simmer without wanting to admit they were invested. I walked past Calder. He didn't even blink. Just kept sipping that overpriced champagne like he hadn't spent weeks orchestrating my unraveling. My mother was adjusting her bracelet, pretending to be occupied. And my father, he turned away the second he saw me coming. I guess even shadows get cold when truth walks in. Then I heard it. Anti-Vesper. It was Cashin. Silas's boy. Bright-eyed and sweet, probably coached to say that. The room wasn't loud, but that word cut clean through. Not stepmom. Not new wife. Just auntie. I froze mid-step. The air changed. It wasn't his fault, he's just a kid, but the meaning was all grown up. That wasn't a mistake. That was a message. I steadied my breath. Bit my tongue. Walked on. Because in that one word, I heard everything they never dared to say out loud. That I was a stand-in. A body to fill a picture. A story prop, not part of the story. As I reached my assigned table, the insult took on a new shape. There it was. A small, square box, wrapped in grocery store paper. I could see the tag even before I sat. A bright, proud $0.99 printed right on top. And the card. Of course, the card. From all of us, in love and modesty. I stared at it. No one said a thing, but I could feel the snickering. The kind that hides behind napkins and water glasses. The kind that doesn't need a laugh track because shame already echoed. I opened the box. Inside was a cheap little magnifying glass. The kind you find in a party favor bag. It had words etched in the handle, inspect carefully. I held it up. Turned it in the light. That was their gift. Their joke. They wanted me to look closer, because they were planning to rip every part of me apart. I didn't sit. I didn't flinch. I just stood, walked straight to the mic, and lifted it like I'd done it 1,000 times before. The room fell into a hush so deep, I could hear my own blood rushing. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I started with the records, real ones. Originals. Medical records untouched by manipulation. No convenient gaps. No interpretations. Then I brought out the letters. My grandmother's handwriting. Her words. The ones she told me to remember when everyone else forgot who I was. And then came the footage. The real footage. Not the spliced, twisted garbage they had projected earlier. I showed timestamps, context, the full scenes they tried to cut down to slander. And then I named them. Calder. My father. Ilara. I didn't scream. I didn't accuse. I just told the truth. And finally, I reached into my purse. Pulled out a check. Laid it flat on the table in front of me. This, I said, is the last penny any of you will ever tie to my name. I turned the check so the cameras could see. 1 cent. Signed, dated, and made out to the Callahan family legacy. People gasped. Chairs scraped. Calder's mouth fell open. My father's lips parted, but no words came. And then Silas stepped forward. He didn't touch me. Just stood beside me. Eyes steady, voice even. She is not a phase. She is not a fabrication. She is my wife, and she is telling the truth. The silence that followed was heavier than any scream. I felt something shift. Not just in the room. In me. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, I didn't feel like I was defending myself. I felt like I had declared something. My name. My worth. The applause started soft. A few hands. A few nods. Some people still frozen. Calder turned pale. My father cracked. His smile, that permanent politician's grin, it vanished. And in the distance, someone lifted a phone. broadcasting, recording. Every lie they ever spun was now unraveling in real time. I could see it in their faces. Some were stunned. Some ashamed. Some just scared. Not of me. Of what I had just made possible. One voice. One record. One refusal to be erased. I thought of her again, my grandmother. Her letter. Her promise. One day your voice will be louder than any silence imposed. She was right. The reception never quite recovered. I left through a side door. Celine on one side, Silas on the other. A couple of allies. No crowd. No congratulations. The air outside was cold, but it felt clean. I turned once. Looked back at the hall, glowing from within. Soundless now. Then I walked forward. Not fast. Not slow. Just forward. They misspelled my name a long time ago. Tonight, I wrote the correct one. And they'll learn to read it. Mornings here feel like a different life. No headlines. No whispers behind draped curtains. No glass doors slamming with courtroom echoes. Just dew on the grass and the soft sound of wind moving through vines. It's not a big place, just a cottage tapped at the edge of a vineyard Silas and I found 3 months ago. Northern California hills. Quiet. Honest. Every morning, I step outside barefoot, black coffee in hand. Same mug. No logo. No statement. Just heat and weight. The kind of silence I used to fear, I now protect like it's sacred. I used to wake with my fists clenched. Now, I wake with open palms. Some mornings, Silas leaves a note. Today's said, remember, it's your name on the sunrise now. He always writes like that. Straightforward. Undeniable. The smallest things hold weight now. A bird's call. A shadow across the vineyard. My own breath not catching anymore. Peace doesn't come all at once, it drips in like morning fog, slow and full. And still, some letters manage to find me. Not from them, not from the ones who tore pages out of me and called it tradition. These come from the outer orbit. Former wedding guests. Some strangers. Most unsigned. But one stood out. Alina. My cousin. My childhood partner in hiding from adult chaos. She wrote that she'd known what they were planning. She hadn't stopped it. Hadn't even whispered. Just watched. Her letter was long. Winding. Regret without expectation. Inside the envelope was a photo, us at age 8. Barefoot. Faces sticky from watermelon. Her note scribbled on the back, you were always brave. I wish I had been. I didn't write back. But I placed the photo on the corner of my desk, where the light hits around noon. Not as forgiveness. Not as a bridge. Just a period at the end of an old sentence. Because there's a difference between healing and pretending nothing happened. Last month, I agreed to one interview. Just one. National. Prime time. They flew a crew out to the house. Set up in the front room, where the walls still smell like fresh paint and lemon oil. I wore a navy dress. No makeup. Didn't need polish, just presence. One question caught me, what would you say to your brother if he were sitting here? I looked straight into the lens. Held the pause. I'd thank him, I said. For showing me exactly who I never want to become. The segment aired on a Sunday. After church. After dinner. At that quiet hour where families either fight or sit quietly in their corners. The reaction was overwhelming. Letters poured in. Women. Daughters. Mothers-in-law. Survivors. Regretters. Strangers who'd seen too much and spoken too late. And I wrote back to some of them, not because I owed them, but because I know what it means to finally be heard. Truth costs. But the receipt lasts a lifetime. I never called Calder back. Never answered my father's voicemails. Never opened the texts. In therapy, I learned something no courtroom ever taught me: you don't need someone else's apology to close a door. Last week, I took the final letter I'd ever let him send. Didn't open it. Just tossed it into the fireplace. Watched it catch. Curl. Crumble. Didn't feel triumphant. Just free. Peace isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's just not explaining yourself anymore. I spend Thursday afternoons now at the local middle school. I mentor a few girls in the speech and debate club. They ask me why I do it. Because no one ever taught me how to speak, I tell them, until I was forced to shout. I see pieces of my younger self in them. The hunger to be heard. The fear of being too much. I tell them to lean into that. Not shrink from it. At home, Silas and I started IVF again. Slowly. Openly. Not chasing something, but walking toward it. If it works, it works. If not, we'll still be whole. In the quiet hours, I'm working on a book. Titled It Chose Myself. That's the truth, really. Some days, love shows up like thunder. Other days, it's just a quiet arm around your shoulder, reminding you to breathe. But one thing it should never be, never, is cruel.